Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Forecast brought to you by Farm Credit. We're just going to do a quick review of the 2023 hurricane season as we're now in the second half of the season. And this map shows us where all of the tropical systems have formed so far this year. It has been interesting to see how many of them have gotten close to the U.S. coastline. We've really only had, to be honest, in terms of significant storm systems, Idalia. Idalia hit us, of course, pretty hard here across parts of Ag South territory. Lee was quite exhausting to watch. It started way off the coast of Africa, and it's taken over 2 weeks for it to finally meander north, and this weekend hit Nova Scotia pretty hard here. But other than that, we've had a relatively inactive Gulf of Mexico. We've not had any systems kind of blow up along the East Coast just yet. But it's a reminder that we're currently sitting right here just past the peak of the hurricane season. And roughly speaking, there's another about 45 days of potential activity when you just look historically at this hurricane season. So we still have quite a ways to go. Right now, the National Hurricane Center is keeping an eye on Tropical Storm Nigel out here. There's a African easterly wave that's following this that's got a 50% chance of developing. I'll show you where that one might go soon. And late this week, we are watching for some convection that could form just off of kind of our coastline here. And we'll talk about why it's going to be there and where I think it's going to go. All right. But a bigger picture idea on this. This is just an animation where as I play this forward, you're seeing the color shading representing the chance of getting a tropical depression forming within the next 10 days. So again, we are not looking at over the next 10 days a major system that's going to be coming anywhere close to the U.S. coastline. As Lee leaves, Nigel comes out here and stays to the north, and that wave on the backside here has, again, it's got a pretty decent chance of forming, but even after 10 days, it's still not even to the Lesser Antilles. Normally this time of year, I start watching the Bay of Campeche very carefully. I start watching systems that come a little more homegrown, much closer to the East Coast, and we do have that one we're going to keep an eye on, but this is the latest we've got from the models. So our animation here shows you the European Ensemble. This is all the different tracks it has. And you can see that late in the time period, some of these tropical low pressure centers are beginning to show up. Now, it's not, it's really late. It's out there past this Thursday and Friday watch. It comes in on Saturday and Sunday right there. And while that's going on, we watch Nigel make a turn. We watch the next wave possibly pop out here. But we just need to see what's going on here. And so I want to kind of give that some thought as we go forward with this forecast. Okay, here is what we're looking at in terms of rainfall. Through the next 5 days, there's going to be a frontal boundary that stalls out right here. And we're going to watch the tail end of that frontal boundary just continue to serve as a point to get the air to rise. You're going to see convection and storms. And what we see is that by late this week, this is Friday morning, then playing beyond that, the chances increase, especially along the coast, of getting some really wet weather. Now, in addition to that, there's a system late this week getting into the weekend that's going to emerge in the central United States. In fact, out ahead of it, maybe as early as Wednesday, we could be watching for some strong to severe storms down south. But notice the probabilities of rainfall have really come up here in the Midwest and the plains as well. We need to keep an eye on this because this has been an area that's been exceptionally dry. So just take a look at Ag South territory here and note that most of what we're going to be getting here after the very heavy rain left us this weekend is this system that's going to try to form here and just stay along the shore. So let's go have a closer look at all of this. First of all, I want to give you some perspective on the last month. So this is August 16th through September 17th, looking at precipitation ranks by climate district. Now, when you look over that time period, you see most of North Carolina is on the normal to wetter than normal. We have a few pockets of drier conditions in parts of Georgia and South Carolina. Most of the Mississippi Basin, a big chunk of the Ohio, and a big chunk of the Missouri River have been very, very dry. Now, there was a weekend front that came through, and I'll show you that in a few seconds. But overall, the soil moisture levels are just so low that we're really struggling with getting water to drain into these major river systems. Out west, just to give you some perspective here, this still captures Hurricane Hillary, and also the deep trough that snuck into the western United States as well. But this Midwest drought here has been quite detrimental to the finish of the crop in this area. It needed one more really good rain to just kind of push away these bigger deficits in yield, but now we've seen it gone over pretty dry here, and there's a lot of concern of what that's going to mean. So maybe a better way to show you this is a month view. Let's just cut it back down to the last couple of weeks. So this is now a percent of normal. The previous map was a rank. This is percent of normal. So we can find the heavy rains pretty easily. They're all up here along the coast. The coast. They're all here along the Rocky Mountains in the high plains over here in the central United States. And we've had just a few areas in Ag South territory that's had some locally very heavy rainfall up until Sunday. Now, Sunday storms did come through and dump a lot of rainfall, and I'll talk about those in a second. But just take a look as to parts of the Tennessee, Ohio, and Mississippi valleys here, at just how much dry weather has been endured in this section of the country. The West Coast is important to keep a very close eye on too, even though California's water health this year has been quite incredible. There's drought expanding in parts of the Pacific Northwest. We're going to talk about that in the longer range forecast at the end of this video. One last way, or maybe two more things to think about here. This is our newest drought monitor, came out on Thursday. And as we can see here, the drought across the south is quite extensive, from southern Mississippi all the way through New Mexico, with the heart of this drought being in Texas and Louisiana. You also notice the Midwest drought continues, and it's going to take a while for this to be undone. But I'd have to say the area that I'm most concerned about all of winter is going to be the Pacific Northwest. We do have some regional pockets of drought throughout Ag South territory, but this has been a summer that we've stayed away from the big drought. Now, some of the concern about this is that it's not just a meteorological drought we're dealing with here. It's also a hydrological drought. What I mean by that is that water that needs to get into the soil to then get into the river systems isn't there. So right now, the Mississippi River down here at Memphis is about 9 feet below low stage. Last week, it was almost 10 feet down there below low stage, and you can just see how dry this area's been. It is dry in northern North Carolina and then getting into Virginia as well. And so this has been an area we watch struggle with quite a bit of heat at times in summer and also very dry conditions overall. Now, I say all of that remembering that this weekend we saw a front slide through here. And this is the total precipitation through the weekend up until 9 o'clock on Sunday night. And there's been some locally very heavy rain in parts of Georgia and South Carolina and parts of North Carolina. There's also very heavy rain in parts of Illinois, and that front that sagged through here over the weekend did bring in some moisture into places that desperately needed it. But it's not enough to undo kind of this longer standing deficit that's driven the drought to be the place that it is. So I was watching satellite here. This was after the sunset, but I'm going to take you back here just before it did. So we have a deeper low that's spinning here over Illinois and Indiana, all right? And we had out ahead of it a longer front that's kind of stalled out, and we saw some big storms on this. Just take a look right as the sun is setting. Look at the shading shown here from the anvil, okay? So the sun's setting over here, of course, you get these huge shadows being cast. But some of these storms locally put down some very heavy rainfall throughout Ag South territory here, and that rainfall did cause quite a bit of flooding. Other than that, we had quite a bit of smoke in the Midwest and through the central plains of the United States, but this pattern is making a pretty big shift on us, and we need to talk about where it's going to go, all right? So let's get into this. I want to add up the precip first, okay? 12's a European model run on Sunday. That's the latest one we get on Sunday. So this rain you see here, this is already gone by Monday morning. So this was Sunday's rainfall, all right? But what you're going to watch after this is right in through here. Keep an eye in this area. You're going to start to see late this week. See, there's not much here Wednesday, but by Thursday and Friday, look at this. There's a lot of deep convection firing up on a stalled out front. It's offshore right now. And the concern will be, as we work our way into this weekend, into early next week, will this convection get close enough to the coast to deliver some rain? Right now, everything you see here, this all came from Sunday. That's already done by the time you wake up and see this on Monday morning. This is all the stuff that's getting added. It is important to note that as we get into this weekend, there is a system blowing up in the midsection of the country, and that system right in through here has the potential to be one of our first big fall-like systems to keep a very close eye on. So that's out about a week. So it took you out there to next Monday, just seeing what the precipitation is going to look like. Another way I want to look at this, though, is to tell you what the pattern is doing. I think there's so much of a story here. So we're looking down on the North Pole, and the blues represent troughs, the cooler air, inclement weather. The ridges are in red. So as we play this through this week, what I'm watching for is right about here, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, this is interesting. I see 3 large ridges. There's one here, there's one there, and there's one here. But none of them are giving a strong signal of being blocked. Now, what I mean by that is if you can end up getting like an omega pattern where you have like, I'll just draw it over here, like a deep trough and a large ridge and another deep trough where it looks like the omega, the Greek letter omega, then you get that. Or if you get a high over low that gets stuck, you can have that. And I don't see that through this weekend, but what I do start to notice is this. By the time we get into next Sunday, okay, we get the flow coming like this. It then dives around this deep trough in the west. And there's a subtropical component that keeps the jet south. See this? There's one trough, there's another one. So the subtropical jet's flying in. But notice this ridge over the Aleutian Islands. Now this is a high pressure ridge over a low. Actually, there's two of them here. And so we always watch that to see if it gets stuck. Now playing through next weekend and out there to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's still there. I cannot call this a full block just yet. It's got to be there for 10 days. That's how we define a block. But this is setting things up. So you can see the flow comes around and up. The subtropical flow comes down and goes south. And here's your high and there's your low. Can you see that? I mean, I just want you to see follow the contour lines. There they go. So this is what's helping stall out the frontal boundary here initially. That's going to kick off that convection, but that's this weekend, or this upcoming weekend. This is all the way out there the following weekend on the 29th. We're still stuck in that configuration. So let's see what it does. So early Monday morning, the front has cleared, and I'm just going to play through the beginning of this week. Ready? There's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we'll pause it right here Thursday night, Friday morning. There's nothing else coming. I'll show you the temperatures in a minute, but nothing else coming until we see where that stalled out frontal boundary sits just off the coast, setting up Friday into Saturday and into Sunday, some sort of a low that moves toward the north. Now, as you noticed, it didn't really add a whole lot of rainfall, maybe along the coast, but that's it. That's all I got in the models right now. And as we work our way through the weekend, yeah, there's a big system here on Friday that blows up in the midsection of the country, and it tries to meander east, but nothing really gets through. And you say, what's going on here? Well, there was one trough that dug in here. There's one low. There's one that pulled up here along the coast. That's the second low. And there's a big ridge that's to the north of it here, and that's that high over low setup. Now, that tends to just slow things down a bit. So that's why when we look out here over the longer run, it's going to be watching these lows cut underneath or to the south of the big high pressure over eastern Canada. And that's why we do see chances for rain moving through our area. Now, remember, from Monday through about Thursday, Friday, we have very little chances of getting rainfall. But once we get past that, the week 2 time frame is looking busier. So what do we have right now? This is from the CPC, this is from the European model, and this is from the GFS. You know, I think the European model's got the right handle. This is only week 2, so the 22nd of September to the 29th. We still see the wetter conditions that are right here along our coast, and we are going to be paying attention to see how those wetter conditions move up the coast. Notice you're near normal. That white means near normal. Quite wet in the Midwest, the Great Plains as well, as with this pattern looking out there into week 2. So that's certainly going to be a bigger shift. This is an area that has been dry. So all of this is due to those large ridges pinching their way toward the Arctic over the next 10 to 15 days. It's just setting us up with a whole new pattern. Okay, temperatures, and then I want to get to the long range. I've been looking forward to telling you about that. Monday, still a cooler day overall for much of Ag South. We played this into Tuesday, no real heat. All the heat's in the Midwest here. There's Wednesday, getting into Thursday and Friday. We just have a week ahead of us where there's not a lot of hot weather coming. By the end of the week, why we stay cooler here is we're expecting quite a bit of cloud cover Friday as that tropical system just off the shore begins to form. So then we go into the weekend cooler as well. So big time temperature rebound in the Midwest into the Central Plains, but we're going to stay on the cooler side of average throughout much of this week. What about looking beyond that? Well, that's your next 5 days. There's that cooler weather I mentioned. Then we play this out day 5 through 10. We still don't break away to big heat. Then we go day 10 through 15, and that's where we start to see maybe by the very beginning of October a slight warm bias. But it's the beginning of October, so to be slightly warmer than average, that means, low to mid 70s versus, slightly warmer than average in July is deep into the 90s, right? So just a transition with the seasons we have to think about. Okay, all of that, I just wanted you to see these next 2 weeks so that I could kind of get out here and tell you what we think is going to happen beyond that. Again, I'm going to have you stare down at the North Pole. I think this is really an intuitive way to look at this. Our jet stream pattern right now is favoring a subtropical piece right there. And it's diving south of that low while there's a ridge to the north of it, and then it all meets over the Atlantic. See it? There's our next ridge. There's the ridge that I pointed out to you over the Pacific Ocean. Now, what I'm finding fascinating about this is as I play out there farther and farther into September, this subtropical piece of the jet hangs on. But what is interesting is that the Pacific jet tried to extend. I didn't see that a week ago. I didn't think it'd do this by the time we got to the very end of September, but it is. And what this is setting us up with is that classic high, see there, over low, right there, potential block. Now, what is fascinating to me about this is this same setup in winter produces big areas of high pressure that sit over eastern Canada. Big areas of high pressure over eastern Canada. Deeper lows that come out of the Gulf. And that is your setup for big-time East Coast winter storms. So I'm just kind of giving you a preview that should this just keep going forward, it's going to make for a very interesting winter for the East Coast. So let's get into this, all right? Let's not go so far ahead yet because I want to talk to you about what I think the next couple of months are going to look like. And the first thing we have to do is just remember that we currently have a building El Nino. We have a lot of warm water across the North Pacific and North Atlantic. This is just the cold water trail from Margot over here, and this is the cold water trail from Lee. And but we'd still note quite a bit of warm water overall across the Atlantic, and it's been very warm all season. The Indian Ocean dipole is still very positive, and it's working together with this positive ENSO event, which we call El Nino, to really control the pattern. Now, last week I got to show you some of the new model runs from like the European model. We looked at the National Multi-Model Ensemble. This week we finally get to round it all up by looking at the newest long-range forecast put out by Columbia University. Now, I'm going to give you the global perspective on this first because there's a couple things I want to point out to you. Notice much of Indonesia and Australia showing up drier in these forecasts. We'll talk more about South America in a minute, but possibly a delay in the Brazilian monsoon arrival. It's normally starting to get here by the 1st of October. This is going to be a year where it's going to be a bit delayed in arriving. Extremely wet down south, though. But take a look at North America. In fact, let's go in and have just a quick closer look at North America. This is what's being projected for October, November, December. And now you see very wet conditions. I mean, just kind of follow that whole arrow. That's where they're going to be into this region. And what's going on here is that we're going to get this subtropical piece of the jet. It's going to probably come across the country like that. And at the same time, the polar jet sneaks over the top and meets up with it. And no matter which way you slice this, it is a wet forecast. So this is the newest for October, November, December. This would be November, December, January. This would be December, January, February. And you notice that every long-range model is just aggressively going after a wetter fall, getting into a wetter winter. And that's been quite consistent. Good news is this beats back drought in Texas. This really sets us up with a lot of soil moisture going into winter, but it's likely going to be a pretty volatile winter overall. All right. Now, I kind of jumped the gun here and I went straight out to the longer range forecast. I'd like to take you back, though, and just show you some things going on here from the CPC main website. So here we go. This was their newest update that released on Friday for week 3, week 4. Now, notice they don't really have a strong opinion on what's going to be happening in Ag South, other than maybe keeping you a bit mild at times. Now, this is the very end of September and the first 2 weeks of October they're looking at here. And there are a lot of things to make us think that this is probably going to be the case. I just think they've gone over, without putting this above normal category in here. I think they should have included that given the setup I think we're going to see with the subtropical jet. Could we be more mild to finish the month after a cooler week this week? I do believe that can happen, especially if that high over low block starts to migrate its way farther to the east. Okay. But what I really wanted to show you is if you come over here to the site, CPC site, you click on the 3-month button right there, just click on it. You're actually taken to the actual model forecasts. And just take a look at this. This is the precipitation forecast for November, December, January. Look how wet this is from Texas all the way to Virginia. Incredibly wet. In fact, it doesn't matter. I can just keep going out there farther and farther. How about January, February, March? You still see it. So right now, the forecast is for a very active subtropical jet setting up this fall and lasting through winter, which means if there is drought concern, we're probably going to wipe it out in a big way coming this winter in Ag South territory. All right. Now, this is mostly being driven by what's going on with El Nino, and I want to bring you up to speed on one other place that I think we need to keep a close eye on. I mentioned a moment ago what was going on in South America, but I want to show you this. This is just a quick 10-day forecast on rainfall across South America. We've had widespread flooding in southern Brazil. This area right into here is called Rio Grande do Sul. But where we're trying to get a crop planted is in the north, this area. So Tocantins, Bahia, Minas Gerais. This is Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso do Sul. They need to see this color widespread through that whole area before they really start going fast. So they were allowed to start planting on Friday. I imagine a lot of them are making very slow progress, if any at all, because the monsoon is drawing moisture. Can you actually see these lines over here? Kind of drawing the moisture from this direction. The moisture, the real moisture, is here. This is too dry. And you got to pull that down farther to the south in order for this monsoon to get going. We don't see that anytime soon. So there's just some concern longer term about what this is going to mean. And in South America, December, January, February starts to beat back that risk. But take a look. November, December, January still showing up very dry in Mato Grosso, which is responsible for about 30% of their total production. So let's just watch this carefully. I think it's going to be more about planting pace than anything else. But I think it's just some good perspective to have as we kind of finish up our growing season here in North America and watch South America take it on. So I'll stop there and tell you all to have a great week, and I will catch up with you again next Monday. Thank you.